can you please tell me a little bit about yourself, your name, where you live and you work?
Okay, my name is Deb Giffen, and I live in Marlton, New Jersey, which is a Philadelphia suburb, and I work in Philadelphia.
Right. And what do you do?
I do several different things. I'm a coach part-time, but I also work for Wharton Executive Education, which is the executive division of the Wharton Business School. And in that capacity, I do innovative learning solutions, which is a really fun job because I get to work with both many companies around the world and also on designing programs for Wharton in particular, programs on innovation and customer centricity.
Right.
Like that. So.
And coaching?
Coaching I do in the evenings. I've been doing it for, about more than 15 years. Close to 20 now, I guess. And coaching is just something I love. I was actually doing it before I knew there was such a thing called coaching.
Right.
And originally got started down this path from reading Marty Seligman's book on learned optimism and discovering that I was a dyed-in-the-wool pessimist and I didn't want to be. So I started down this learning path. Right. And found coaching partly as a result of that. I was doing it with people before I knew what it was. And
right. And the people that you usually work with, what kind of people are they?
Now I typically work with people who are executives or own their own business, and then I also work with some younger, newer coaches to help mentor them.
Right.
Usually positive psychology coaches.
Right. And so what do they ask you for help with? Like what's the topics?
Usually they come to me because they have a really big vision that they'd like to accomplish, or they are in an exploratory mode. Sometimes with executives, it's what do they want their legacy to be, what do they want the next career step to be. Business owners, people who want to be a business owner. I'm coaching one person I've been coaching for quite a while who was in higher ed administration and wanted to start and run his own business, and he's got a really thriving tree farm now down in Costa Rica.
Right.
So it's all different kinds of things, but mostly the common theme among all the people I coach is that they're very interested in looking at the way that they focus their mind.
Right.
And how focus affects the results in life. So that's the theme.
Is that what they ask you for when they come, or is that kind of where it ends up?
They come in sort of with all sorts of different things. Like, most of them have heard about me through somebody else. It spreads word of mouth. And they know somebody who's worked with me, and they are interested in achieving something more. It's usually not, in the beginning when I first started coaching, I would get more people who were trying to stop doing something or get away from something, or there was a problem or a challenge, and now I typically work with people who are quite successful in life and want more. Like Tiger Woods doesn't have 3 coaches because he's not a good golfer.
No.
And so I work with people who are really, excelling and exceeding on their own, and they want a partner because it's more fun. And
And what's your training and educational background for doing all of this?
I have a undergraduate degree in psychology, and then I attended Marty Seligman's Authentic Happiness coaching program, and that was really fun and interesting. Introduction to how to start applying it to coaching. And I took the Master's in Applied Positive Psychology program at UPenn and graduated from that. And since then, I've done just a lot of teleclasses and webcasts and things and lectures by people.
Right. And can you tell me how you do it? Like what would a normal coaching sessions look like?
A normal coaching session.
Yeah, not just one session, but several sessions. Like what happens before and during the first session and in between and stuff.
Well, before I work with anyone at all, I usually do a half-hour to 45-minute session with them on the phone just to see if we're a good match. Coaching is so much about chemistry that if it's not a good match, then it's not good for either of us to work together. So the first conversation is really about who they are, what they want to achieve, where they've come from, so a little about their background, and then what they most want to accomplish. And as I listen to them and hear them talk about that, it gives me an understanding of how I can then explain what I do to them in a way that is very related to who they are.
Right.
And then also with every call, I tell them I know a lot of resources, and in addition to seeing if I might be a good match for them, I'm also going to be looking to see if I think somebody else would be a good match for them, or recommend other things like books or classes or conferences or things like that would be good for them too. So that's how I typically first start with them. Then when they come in and initially start working with me, it's mostly, the first couple sessions are mostly about them talking and me understanding the way that their mind works and how they function, so I can start to pick up things. I can see where they are holding things in a pessimistic way. I can see where, what lights them up and makes them happy, and where they get, much lower energy. So I'm really assessing them more on a sort of an energetic level around it. And then as we talk, I'll look and see if there might be some assessments that would be good for them. We'll talk about that later, but the VIA assessment is one of the ones I use, and Strength Finder too. And it depends on what they're most interested in accomplishing, what I'll use with them. Some people are more interested in doing things in their career path. Some people are more interested in their relationships. Some people are, very interested in getting the cross chatter out of their minds.
Yeah.
I call it your inner team. When your inner team, all those voices in your head are very aligned around something, you make incredibly rapid progress.
Yeah.
But when there's dissenting voices, like you want to lose weight and you want to eat the chocolate cake, okay, those two voices are in opposition, and it's going to be much more difficult.
Yeah, yeah. So is that the first session, or is that more than one session? What you just mentioned?
It varies depending on the people. It really, everything is so individualistic. Some people are very clear about what they want when they come into a session, and then we're just really focused and oriented and ready to go, and some people like to work that way, in a very linear way. Other people are not clear when they come in, and so there you need to do a little more exploring, and asking lots of questions, listening to tonal variations in their voice as they talk about things, helping them sort of draw it out of them.
Right. And do you do it in a certain way? Do you have some principles you follow, a model, or?
I have a general coaching model that I use, and that's how I explain it to people after I know who they are. So the first thing, I think, for success, which is what everybody wants, success, whether it's success in, in their career, or success in a relationship, or success in, just a hobby that they love doing, whatever it is that they want to achieve. Success always comes from three things, no matter what area it's in. The first is having a really, really clear vision of what you want. And many people come in with a very, very clear vision of what they don't want.
Yeah.
And it never works to have negatively focused goals, ever, in my opinion, in my experience over the last 15 years. I've never seen it work for anybody. Mm-hmm. You have to take what they do and flip it around into a positively oriented goal.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. Some people are very clear to begin with. Some people are not very clear.
Yeah.
The second thing is, once they have a clear goal, you have to get all of them aligned around that goal. Like that's just the inner team that I talked about before, all those voices in their head. Because if they look back on their lives, they can almost see that when they were doing something in the past, that time when they were just like smooth sailing ahead, all the doors were open, it's usually because every single part of them was saying yes to that goal they were going after. And when it doesn't move very fast, it's because part of them is saying no. Yeah. And so we sometimes get conversations going among those different voices in their head, and help those voices learn how to get aligned around a common goal. So it's getting rid of that, inner dissonance that's going on, and creating a cohesive path ahead. And then once you get the clear vision and the alignment around that vision, then the third step is inspired action. And some people go into coaching they think they have this goal, they have this mental goal up here that they want, but there's conflict around it. And then they just think action alone will do it for themselves. And it never works. That's when they are banging their heads against the wall. Because if you take action before you're lined up around a clear vision, even if it's only your vision for your next step moving forward, then it's going to be much more difficult. You can't trust your intuition. Right. Because your intuition is conflicted. Yeah. So once you get it lined up, then you start saying, I think I'll go to this party tonight. You don't know why, but at the party you meet somebody who has, a great business contact for you or something else that,
So how did you develop that model, or end up with it, or get it? Or?
Oh gosh, it's so long ago. I don't know. Little pieces that I've learned from different places, and this was built before I even went to the MAP, or before Positiv Psychology was even born.
Right.
I was doing this, and because I've seen it work.
Yeah.
And that I've used it over the years and refined it, but it's always worked for me.
Right. So what happens like further in?
Further in? Okay, so the first part of any coaching engagement over the long term is getting them clear on a vision. And the second part is on getting themselves aligned around it. And then always during that is a constant shifting back and forth among those things, because in some areas they're clear, other areas they're not, and then life brings you a new situation, and all of a sudden you have a new perspective, and from here, what do you want next? Now what do you want? Okay, now you're here, now what do you want? And so it's a constantly evolving thing, and that's basically how it just flows. I have one client that I've been coaching for 14 years, and it's not because she hasn't achieved her goals. She has achieved many, many goals, and she just loves the process of it. She loves having somebody to talk with that's totally focused on her and her goals, and what's coming at her in her life, and helping her to sort of look at and frame it for herself. So, and it's fun to work with her. So.
And what happens at the end?
At the end, when clients are usually people have achieved their goals, they've gotten where they want to be, or they have hit a stage that they're happy. They've done a huge step forward. They're ready to stop and integrate for a little while, and so we just say I never close the door, and I will leave it open, and oftentimes people will come back for a check-in session, or and they're welcome to do a drop-in session like that at the end of people that I've worked with before. Right.
And you mentioned assessments?
Yeah.
Like the VIA and StrengthsFinder. Can you tell me more about how you use those?
I use at the very beginning, just to sort of help people get a clear view of what their strengths are, because that helps with their vision. Yeah. Once you really want to ground their vision in their strengths and in their values, and in their the things that light them up. So as you work more around those things, I use them as conversation starters. So it's not just doing the VIA and showing it to them, it's like pulling things out of that then we can say and go back to, like, okay, so you can't decide between this job and this job. Which one will use your strengths more? Which one would, so I'll bring it back as appropriate into the conversations all the way through coaching. Right.
And so when would you assign the VIA to them? Like, would that be in the first session, or?
Usually not the first session. Again, it depends on the person. There's some people who really don't want to do assessments, and if you worked with anyone with ADD, it's very difficult for them, and they don't like it. But for the most part, it's very individualized to the people. I usually use it near the beginning of a coaching engagement, because it helps them get that first vision piece. Right. But it's not always in the first session. I don't follow anything like verbatim. It's always based on what I'm hearing from the person I'm working with. Right. And they set the agenda, but I help them set it by picking up on what they need at the moment.
Right. And you mentioned that the strengths assessments help with the vision and the values. Mm-hmm. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. When you get in conversations around these things, and you look at their strengths, I also use some things from my coach training. I got my coach training through Coach University, and that went into a lot of different things that looked at needs and values, and I developed some of my own work with a colleague around this called hunger, the things that we hunger for. And hunger is never totally satisfied, so they always come back. So when you know what those things that if people have a hunger for respect or a hunger for appreciation, then you need to factor that in. I have one client with a hunger for results. Okay. And if she's not in a position where if she gets stymied in something, and because of other people she's not able to get results, she goes crazy. Because her hunger is not being fed. And so we have to start looking at different ways that she can break it into smaller pieces or see what she has control over. So all of these things in combination, the strengths and looking at people's values, looking at their hungers, and weaving them together into sort of a portrait for themselves. I also look at something called their storehouse. It's their, which is a combination of their strengths you know, their talents, which are things that they have, you know, developed in life, the opportunities that are around them at the moment, the resources that they have available, time, money, other people that can help, and then the last thing is energizers.
Right.
What are the things that give them energy? Something they can do in 2 seconds, or something that they can do in 2 weeks, you know?
So do you map that out, or how do you talk about those subjects?
They all come up gradually over time. With some people I use this, and with other people I don't. If some people always have a great source of energy in them, I won't use the energy conversation. But if somebody's down in a slump, I will. And I've developed a couple of my own things too. Assessments that I've talked with Marty about one of them that sort of combines some positive psychology research. The first one I call the Daily Dozen. And many people out there, other coaches have used it. I give full permission to people to use this. It's fine, but it's the Daily Dozen is. Do you want to hear about this
yes,
now?
Yes,
okay.
yes.
The Daily Dozen is basically 12 things, but they're grouped into 3 items under 4 categories. So the first category is positives.
Yeah.
So it's something you do it once a day, as the Daily Dozen implies, and you can do it people do it for a while and then they stop for a while. So usually when they're facing a you know, more of a challenge, they'll do it again.
Yeah.
So the first thing is that every day, either in the evening or the morning, they write down 3 positive things that happened in the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
And right after it, one thing that they did to make it happen.
Right. Yeah.
This shows the self-efficacy.
Yeah.
That they are responsible for some good things happening in their lives.
Yeah.
And so the focus on the positive gets people sort of realigned if they've been stuck a little bit, and shows them that good things are happening.
Yeah.
And it makes them look if they can't see the good things.
Yeah.
Then the next set of 3 is 3 challenges that they're facing, and one thing that they could do to move each challenge in a positive direction.
Yeah.
Okay. Doesn't have to fix it, doesn't have to solve it, but it has to move it slightly in a positive direction. Yeah. And they don't have to do it either.
Right.
But they have to write down something they could do.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the next 3. The third set of 3 is blessings. Okay, so that's straight from positive psychology. It's 3 things, three things that they're grateful for.
Yeah.
That happened in the last 24 hours. And we know from all the positive psychology work how important that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other things are grounded in other, you know, research from.
And how's that different from the first one?
Yes, and most people do ask that. How is gratitude? Okay, so what's something positive that happened in the last 24 hours? Could be the same thing as something you're grateful for, but you can also be grateful for your health.
Right.
You can be grateful for your children. You can be grateful for.
Okay.
So it gives you a little freedom, and sometimes it'll appear on both lists.
Right. Okay.
But sometimes it's not, and in a way, it's very interesting for people to try to see how they sometimes correspond.
Yeah.
That I'm grateful for my children, and one of the great things that happened is my child, you know, came up and gave me a big hug. You know? So that's the third thing, and the last set of 3 is something that I developed that I talked with Marty about. He said nobody's doing this yet in positive psychology, but I call it's sort of a combination of best possible future self and gratitude. So I call it future gratitude.
Right.
So the last 3 things you write down are 3 things that you write them down as if you're grateful for them right now, but they haven't happened yet.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So it might be that you really want to go to Disney World at some point. So you say, I'm so thankful that I've gotten to go to Disney World, and I'm having such a great time here.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So you're writing it down as if it were true now.
Yeah.
For something that you want.
Yeah.
And that one alone has been incredibly effective.
Okay.
For people. Many things that appear on people's future gratitude lists appear in their positives later on in life.
Right.
Some of them happen sooner than other things, but it's that positive focus as if it's already here.
Yeah.
That is really interesting. So in a way, it's working with the principles from Best Possible Future Self, where you're putting that out there, but you're pulling it in so that you're telling if you look at neuroscience and how the brain works, the brain can't tell the difference between something you're vividly imagining and something that's real.
Yeah.
So if you vividly imagine that this has already happened, this is who you are. For example, if you wanted to, do public speaking and you were really frightened of it, you would be so grateful that you gave a fabulous speech and everybody loved it.
Yeah.
And your brain gets wired that way, so it takes away some of the fear factor.
Yeah.
So that's how it works.
Right.
So those are the 4 categories of Daily Dozen, and 3 items in each category.
Right.
And people have used this in companies. People have used it in, in spiritual coaching. People have used it in general life coaching, and I use it with executives, and yeah.
And do you use other things also? Like,
yeah, I have another thing that I developed that's called flipping, and it's a way to take problems and turn them into progress for people. So flipping is sort of a 5-step process, and I can send you more information on it if you want.
Yeah,
but basically, the way flipping works is, and I use this at the very beginning of looking at the vision that people hold. So if they have a negative away from vision, if they say, I don't want to be fat anymore, okay, or something, that's not what, I don't usually coach on that, but that's just an example. But then you start getting them to say, that I would love to weigh, X pounds. So flipping involves it's very clearly looking at what you don't want. You're identifying something that you really do not want and you don't like. So you find, what is the positive opposite of that? What does this mean you want? It's there for a purpose. So anytime you're headed down a road toward a goal, when you hit an obstacle, it's there for a really good reason. And it's there to help you clarify your vision of what you want. So flipping helps you say, okay, so I've been heading to grad school. I was really excited about this. I had my funding all lined up, but part of it fell through. Yeah. Okay, so what do you want? You want additional funding that will help you go to grad school. So it takes your mind off the problem, focuses it on a new goal. Yeah. And then once it's focused on the new goal, you start asking yourself questions about it. So you could say, so how could I, and usually there's something there that's a stopper in it, like I want to buy the new car, but I don't have enough money. Yeah. Okay. And so you make them a contradiction in your mind. So instead of saying, I want a new car, but I don't have enough money, or I want the higher level job, but I don't want to have to travel and be away from my family, you say, how can I have how can I get the higher level job and the time with my family? Yeah. So instead of a, but, you turn it into an and. Then you turn it into a question of how can I find? Yeah. How can I find some ways that would help me find this? And then the mind can't ignore a question. So you've got your subconscious mind aligned around with your conscious mind in moving ahead in that way. So that's how flipping works. Right. And it can be a very quick, instantaneous process. A lot of my clients who, they go, okay, so I hit this challenge, and I said, so what would Deb say? I knew what she'd say, so I flipped it around, and I knew that this is what I wanted, so I focused on that. So it sort of becomes almost an instantaneous process when people use it for a while. Yeah.
And assessments, or this is more like, would you call this an
intervention? These are my own, yeah. Well, it's not so much an assessment as a process, I guess, for that one. Right. But it also, along the way, what can happen is that you get people to sort of look at these questions that you ask yourself, then it for me becomes an assessment of where they are around. Right. So the line between assessments and processes is a little blurry in my work.
Yeah. And when do you know when to use which assessment, like strengths assessment and gratitude, or?
Yeah, and I look at pathways to happiness too. And I will find other assessments out there that I run across. I've just found a great social networking one on how do you build a good network for yourself. Right. For supporting you in every single way in your life. So as soon as I find something that I think might be interesting, I'll give it to my clients. Right. So some of it is I find something new and I share it with all my clients. Right. And some of it is, as I'm working with somebody, I realize that something I know from my body of knowledge would be useful for them, and then I'll bring it in. But I don't have a set thing. In month one we do this, in month two we do this, in month three. I don't work that way.
Right. And what about like processes or interventions? What other types do you use?
Okay, we talked a little bit about the two most important ones that I use. I use the Daily Dozen, and I use the flipping for it. Other interventions, I've had people focus in on savoring things in their life and getting them to do that, so that it was a way of celebrating the good things that are happening. I basically have them stop and look at look back on their life, so that they're sort of doing to go collect things that were wonderful that happened in the past. If they're stuck in a way and they feel like, I'm not good at this. I'll have them go back and find times in the past that they were good at it. So in a way, it's sort of creating that storyline that gets done. Best possible future self, I have people do. I have people write sometimes I will have them write a biography. It could be as long as they want. I said it has to be at least a page and a half, but if you want to write longer, that's fine.
Yeah.
And they write a biography of themselves. And if I see a lot of victim thinking in it or anything else that looks like it's not aligned with keeping them full speed ahead, we'll work together to rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it until they start to see their past in a different light, from a different framework, from a positive-oriented framework.
Right.
And for that, I use a lot of things out of goal setting and some of the other work that's being taught in positive psychology.
And the rewriting, does that take place in the session or between the sessions?
Usually between the sessions, then we discuss it in the session and we'll sort of edit.
So you edit in the session?
Yeah.
Right.
Together.
And then the person will do the rest between the sessions?
Right, between sessions, yeah.
What about the other processes that you mentioned? Is that in the session or between the sessions?
It could be either way. There's some people who prefer to have me walking through it with them in the session.
Right.
Or there's some people I can say, I'm going to send you this, call me if you have any questions. And then we do it. They do it. Some people are really quick and they just do it on their own. They get it and they just go right off with it. Other people want more support.
Right. And how do you introduce processes or interventions like this?
Almost always with a way of saying something like, what you've just been talking about reminds me of this. Would it be helpful for you to try something? There's an assessment that does this. What do you think? And if they say, no, then I won't. And if they hardly ever do. They usually say, yeah, I'm willing to try that. So.
Right.
Yeah. And I pull in assessments from all different places. I mean, I use positive psychology in my coaching a lot, and I pull in from many other venues that I've worked with.
Right. What about knowledge sharing? Like you said, you mentioned some things that from your background.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say more about that?
About how I find other things to share? Or
Yeah, and how you share that?
How I share it? Okay. I've been fascinated for years with the Enneagram.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with that, and they have some wonderful online assessments. So if I start to see patterns coming up in someone that I think they would benefit from, again, I ask them if they would like to play with something interesting and new, and I just send them the links and have them do it, and then we talk about it afterwards. I always learn. I love to learn and grow. I can't not learn and grow. Mm-hmm. So I'm always out exploring something. Right now I'm looking at some of the Arbinger Foundation's work on the anatomy of peace. And I'm looking at, one class I'm taking is listening to the body long distance. Of how you can pick up different cues about how people are feeling from the way that they're talking.
Right,
yeah.
Okay.
So,
and you use that in coaching?
Yes. Sometimes I'll just tell people about different things. I work with a mastermind group too, and we just told them about the way how you can assess the ways that people are breathing and how you can help them change their state by how they're breathing. Right. And they said, I'm meeting with them tomorrow morning, and they said, we want to hear all about this. So it's just a way of sharing things with people that.
And how would you use that in coaching, for instance? Like you learn something new. How would you?
Okay. I have one client who I work with who is oftentimes comes to the call, she's in a high stress position and she comes to the call. And in that phase, she's always doing high chest breathing.
Yeah.
I've been doing high chest breathing here because when you get excited and you talk about things, you get high chest breathing. But you can also come more from a middle chest breathing. And the different ways of being are appropriate in different environments. And if you're stressed, you tend to be very high chest breathing, sometimes almost up in your throat.
Yeah.
And so I'll ask her to take just a moment to settle down in her heart area. Or sometimes I'll have her settle down in her lower stomach, so the deep belly breathing. Yeah. When you go down to that level of breathing, you can see that my energy is really different.
Yeah.
And so when people are, and I'll use my voice in different ways when I'm talking with people, when I'm doing like speaking in front of a classroom or something, I'm usually in the high energy space. But when I'm talking with somebody who's gone through a tough situation, or when I'm trying to get them really to go deep on a personal exploration, I'll drop my breathing to a really low place so I can talk like this.
Right.
And you can see I'm very different.
And can you see how it affects them?
Yes. And you can hear where they're coming from when you're talking with them. You can hear if they're talking more fast and from the high chest, or if they're more calm and relaxed. And usually they don't stay down in the really slow state very long, but if you ask them to just tune in and go there and feel, that's when they can start to really pick up on their intuition and their gut feelings.
Right.
Because the gut feelings are not available to people when they're up here.
No, right, yeah. And knowledge sharing, can you say something more about, so should you tell them about models, theories, research, or?
I think my clients are, once in a while, especially people that I will if it's people that I'm coaching, they're positive psychology coaches, but for the most part, the executives and the entrepreneurs and the business owners that I work with, they don't care about the theories. Well, they want to know that I know about it.
Yeah.
They want to know that I know about all this and it really will work, but they just want to know, what do I do and how do I do it?
Right.
So I'll sort of take the theory, I'll understand the theory, and I'll think, okay, how can we apply this?
Right.
And that happens here in my work in leadership development too. It's, people are not so much interested in the theory of our faculty members. They are, that's why they come here, but they don't want to hear about the theory.
Right.
They don't want to hear about why it's important or what it relates to in the past. They want to know, okay, so you've done all this work, now tell me what should I do?
Right.
Tomorrow morning when I get into the office, that will make a difference. And I think it's the same with most of my clients.
So do you tell them what to do, or how do you use the theory that you have in your mind?
Well, I use the theory to know how to help them look at things and frame things, and usually they agree on actions. It's not just me telling them what to do.
Right.
It's me possibly suggesting alternatives, and then we talk about whether it be effective for them. And it's always their choice.
Right.
What they choose to do.
Right.
Yeah. But I like the theory for myself because then I know that it's been like the research, because it proves theories.
Yeah.
So I know that focusing on gratitude is effective.
Right.
So I feel very comfortable pushing people even a little bit to do that.
Right.
Okay. Even if they have trouble with it, I'll sometimes I'll pull in, if they are head people, I will give them the research behind it.
Right.
And say why it's important. If they're more heart people, I will say, well, if you had more gratitude in your life and you felt more grateful, how would that affect your relationship with your son? And I know you've really been wanting that to be a better relationship. What would happen if you brought some gratitude into that? And so you pull on their heartstrings around something. And so, if I usually don't dictate or force people, but I will, if there's a lot of research behind something and I believe in it, I will keep suggesting it from different angles.
Right.
So it was around knowledge sharing?
Yeah. I was thinking about if you give me an example of something where you have suggested something. So you're taking the theory but not necessarily mentioned it, and then suggested actions or something. If you give me an example.
Example of the. Okay, let me see. There's a lot of interesting things on self-regulation, okay, and how that works, and how if you get more self-regulation in one area, it can improve your self-regulation in other areas. But you can also run out of it by the end of the day.
Yeah.
So in other words, if you get in a habit of exercising, then you'll also probably be more inclined to eat better.
Yeah.
And other things too. But if you're trying to do all of these things at once, you run out of willpower by the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I know that theory. So I'll use that theory when people, are trying to do something new and they say, "I was really good all day, but I blew it at night," or and I was really focused on, being in a positive mood with my employees early on, but then something happened, and so we'll look at how they can re-energize themselves.
Yeah.
So it's not so much talking about their self-regulation and what they need to do with it. It's saying, okay, so you're running out of energy. So you're able to do it in the morning when you're full of energy, but by the end of the day, you're not full of energy. So let's look at how we can change your energy levels during the day. How can we re-energize you and keep you there?
Right.
And so that's one way, one example.
Right.
Then it's also looking at, letting them know sometimes that, as they start to just work on one thing, let's not try all these things at once.
No.
Let's work on one thing at a time, because that takes less energy. So this is all application of that theory.
Right.
But it's not really street theory.
Right. Okay. Yeah. You've mentioned a little bit the flexibility, like adapting it to clients. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. It's like I know that a lot of people, when I first started learning about coaching, that there were people that said, here's how you conduct, everybody wants to know. When anybody starts coaching, they go, how do I do my first session? They throw on a plan that's mapped out for all those things. For me, that's the antithesis of coaching. Yeah. Because the coaching should come out of where the person is in the moment. Yeah. And as one of my good coaching friends says, he's not in the positive psychology community, but he says, coach the person, not the history. Yeah. So you don't want to have some kind of set thing lined up, because then you won't be there with them in person and you won't be pulling on what's happening around them. I find life brings you lots of metaphorical things, so that will happen in your life. So for example, if you're your car got a flat tire on the way to work, okay, so what else in life is sort of not able to move forward because of something? There's usually some kind of, you can play with the metaphor, and usually there's something there. So in any point with a client, I'm really more paying attention to who they are and not to a set way of doing things. That's why when you said, so at what point do you bring in this assessment? It's not always session 2. I don't know. It's when it fits for the client. Yeah. And I think that's how it has to be. I mean, it's been proven with positive psychology interventions too. It has to be sort of with the right person and the right intervention match, but it also has to be at the right time. There's sometimes when they can hear it, and sometimes when they can't, and sometimes when they're more willing to be experimental in life, when they're feeling great and have had a couple of wins, and if they've been feeling beaten down a little bit, they're not going to want to be more experimental. So you really have to balance it out.
So how do you find out what's the right intervention or what's the right timing? Like how do you,
intuition.
Your intuition, and what does it tell you?
Oh gosh, okay, quantifying intuition. I'll hear something in their voice that lets me sense what they most want or need in the moment. Right. That's something that I was born with. I'm pretty naturally attuned in when I'm talking with people about what they want, especially in coaching sessions, because I get very focused. Yeah. And as I hear it, it's almost like I sort of feel it in my own body. Yeah. What they want or need. And then as I feel it in my own body, I go into my mental database up here and say, what would make this move forward? What would help in this situation? What would be interesting or inspiring? What would make them sometimes feel better? Right. So it's how my mind finds whatever it is that I don't know. It just something pops in. It feels right.
But it's interesting that you can kind of feel their needs and wants. Right.
So I've trained myself to do that. I mean, that's not always something that happens at the beginning with coaches. And some people have more of a gift for it than other people. Yeah. It's one of those things, they call it T1 lines. Some of it, well, it's strengths. It's strengths. And one of my natural strengths is doing that.
And you said you trained yourself?
I've also trained myself to listen effectively to who they are. Not just the words they're saying, but the way they're saying them, what they might not be saying them, how their voice sounds. Yeah. Like if they're saying, well, I got this great new job opportunity, it sounds really interesting. That's very different than saying, I have this great new job opportunity, it's really interesting. Yeah. So right in there that the first there's something that they're not really thrilled about that first one. Yeah. So it's training, and that's a gross example, but you can, as you start to listen to voices, and I do almost all my coaching over the phone. Yeah. So as you do that over years, you start to hear different things. Right. But I'm still learning. That's why I'm taking a class right now. Listen to the body.
So do you sometimes do also face-to-face coaching?
Once in a while, and it's funny because some of the time when I do that, I actually will find myself looking away because the face can distract. Right. Yeah. Although I'm fascinated by some of the stuff with the micro expressions. Yeah. But I'm not very good at doing that yet. Right.
So what do you focus on in a conversation? The body language, the tone of voice, the breathing? Where's your attention?
In person?
Yeah.
In person, because I'm really strong in assessing just from voice and energy level, I tend to focus on that. But I will look at body language because that gives you a lot of information too. Right. If they're slumped in, and it's a very different situation than if they're not. So.
So why do you have a lot of telephone coaching? Do you prefer that, or is that?
Yeah, and my clients have been all over the world, so it's much easier to do it that way. Plus, we usually both of us travel, so so it's easier to work out shifts or changes in the coaching schedule.
Right. Okay. I have some questions about what makes it effective, like some of the factors that might contribute to the effectiveness of the coaching. Mm-hmm. And so what do you do to establish credibility, like for you or the way that you work?
Okay.
So for people to have good expectations.
The first thing I do to establish credibility is get the personal level credibility, and the most important thing in that case is to let people know that I really care about who they are and that they're very important to me. So in that intro conversation that I do, that's why I start with just being very open and asking questions and being really curious about who they are so I can learn. And then picking up on what's interesting to them, what's exciting for them, and seeing if I can resonate and get excited about their goals too. Yeah. Because if I can, I know it's going to be a good match.
Yeah.
So that the personal level credibility is the first thing I do. And then out of that, the next thing I do is I start talking about my coaching model, how I work. I'll generally say a little bit about myself, that I've been coaching for over 15 years, that I'm a master certified coach through the International Coach Federation, and that I've done a lot of work in positive psychology. Yeah. And I don't have a website. Some people ask, where's your website? I've always had a full practice, as full as I want it to be. Yeah. And so I've never put together a website. I know I probably should at some point, and I've been thinking about it, but it's
marketing. If you don't need it, then
yeah. And my practice tends to be about as full as I can handle at the time, given my other work.
Right. And you said that you let people know that you care. How do you let them know? Like,
most of that is just by people sort of know you care if you're really interested in who they are.
Right.
If you ask good questions, some of it comes down to active, constructive responding. Yeah. So that's one thing, but I don't sort of much use that as a technique, I was doing it before I knew it was a technique.
Right.
That's how other people can understand it. But it's really just responding to people in an active and positive way, and then also helping them see an even more exciting version of themselves.
Right.
So looking at what their dreams are and seeing how you can see that could happen based on what you see in terms of their strengths and their skills.
Right.
So I think it's so much happens at a human level and a chemistry level. So if you have that chemistry and that connection, and you can sort of build that sense of caring, just like you would if somebody you met at a party or something.
Yeah.
Then from there you can start to build on what you do. And I'm not ever trying to prove anything to anybody. If they don't like the connection with me and they don't want to work with me, I'm more than happy to. And I usually do make people who've never coached before, I usually make them go interview 3 other coaches.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because I think it's really important. Fit is so important. Yeah. And I'm not out just to get clients for myself. I'm out to help coaching succeed by getting the person with the right coach. Yeah. So I'll usually recommend a couple other people. I'll send them the ICF or the MAP website and have them, find somebody that they are, might be even a better match for.
Right.
And if it's right, they'll come back to me. And
right.
If it's not, they'll go somewhere else. And either way, it's good.
Yeah. So do you do something special to create the good relationship?
Something special.
Do you do specific things, or?
Okay, actions, you mean?
Actions, or whatever, the things that you say or do, or?
I think I just like the active constructive responding is clearly one of the ways. I genuinely really like them a lot. I really, really like my clients, and so that just comes out in our interaction, and they like me, And my clients, the Costa Rican tree farm person, I'm about to go down and spend a week at their home in Costa Rica. So so you get to know people in a way that's just really opens up a great sense of safety, because there's genuine friendship in it as well. It doesn't always happen with clients. Sometimes it's more professional, but they still have to know that I really like them and admire them and appreciate them. So that's one thing I do. Another thing I do is, like, I will contact them between sessions. Yeah. Sometimes, it's not all about, if I see something that I think is interesting to them, I'll send off an email. If I know that they've got a big thing coming up in their life, I'll check in by phone and say, how'd it go? I tell them always at the end of a session, if there's something big on the horizon, I said, you call me or email if it moves on this.
Yeah.
You know, so they know that it's like, it's not just, well, this is our professional relationship and don't contact me outside that. You know, it's definitely not that way.
No.
Or partnership.
And do you do other things to make sure that they're kind of engaged in the process between the sessions?
Luckily, I don't have to work with anyone that's assigned to working with me. I know in corporate cultures sometimes people do.
Yeah.
But I will not take anyone on that's not here voluntarily. So in general, people are pretty eager to move ahead.
Right.
Now, there's sometimes when there's something that they can't move ahead on, or they say they want to, but they don't.
Yeah.
And I tell them, okay, at the very beginning of a coaching session, I'll say, you are more important to me than any of your goals. So we'll pick some goals together. We'll work towards them. But if in the process of working towards them, you discover that that's not the right path for you, and we explore it to make sure it's really not the right path for you, rather than just, you know, you're scared, then I have no trouble shifting with you, because you are more important to me than your goals. And so then when something comes up that they are consistently saying each week they want to do, but they are not doing it, I know one of two things needs to happen. Either it's not the right goal, and we'll explore that, or it needs to be broken down into smaller steps.
Right.
And so we'll explore that for a little bit and talking about it to see which one of those it is. And if we don't know, we'll break it down into smaller steps and see if that works. Yeah. And if that doesn't work, then we'll go back and start exploring the other thing.
Right.
So that's one of the ways that
Right. Do you do other things to help them stay engaged? I think one of the things I do is I can always see another step forward for them. Right. Okay. So they may see, oh, I could get to here, but I always see they can get to here. Yeah. You know, and what the next step is. I'm working with somebody now who's moved into a senior partnership role in a company, and is sort of exploring in a way that's a little scary for her at the beginning, but becoming a CEO. Right. And so we're starting to explore that and gather experiences from her life that show her, that get her the feeling that she could do this. Yeah. And getting her connected with other female CEOs and doing other things like that. And I know she can get there. So she's very engaged because there's a goal in front of her that is more than she 2 years ago would have ever thought she could do. Yeah. And now she's thinking it's a possibility, and she's pretty excited about it. Right. So if you always have, I tell people that, you know, the one thing that will really help reduce self-sabotage, which can happen in anybody, when you have a goal and you've reached the pinnacle, you can see this in rock stars or movie actors or something, when they're at the peak, and there's nowhere higher to go, we are change-loving beings, even though we think we don't like change. We get really, really bored. Yeah. Okay? So if the only place to go is down, if you're at the top of the ladder and the only place to go is down, you're going to self-sabotage. Yeah. So when you reach a goal, it's important to do two things. The first thing is to be grateful, because otherwise the energy builds up in your body and you'll get stuck. So you have to be grateful and let it out. The other thing is to set a higher goal. Yeah. A higher vision, something else. You can celebrate for a little while, and I will celebrate with them, but pretty soon after the celebration, we're going to say, you know, now that you're here, where else do you think you could go? Yeah. And it's an intriguing question for people, which is why I tend to keep clients long term, because they keep wanting to see what's next. Right, yeah. So how do you celebrate with them? Oh, it's usually just like joyful conversations on the phone, drawing out active, constructive responding, getting them to talk more about it, because in most people's lives, you know, it's hard for some of their friends to even listen to their success. Right. You know, so people love having a forum where they can just talk about it and say, "Oh, that's really cool," and "How did it feel when that happened?" and "What was the best part about that for you?" And when you have a conversation like that, is that, are they satisfied with that, or do they want that coaching conversation to also reach some goals or make some action steps, or? People are pretty comfortable with a flow, and I check it if they want action steps. I'll say, sometimes they'll say, yeah, it's really great, but now you know, and then we'll move on to whatever it is they want to do. Right. But I try to encourage them to celebrate it, whether it's on the phone with me just for a minute. Sometimes I'll say, we're going to take 2 minutes and celebrate this. I know that you're a goal-achieving machine and you want to move on. We're going to take 2 minutes and we're going to just savor the really good parts of this. Yeah. Because otherwise you're always just going to be on this treadmill of achieving, and it's important to recognize your success. Right, yeah. So I'll do that with them. Yeah. Right.
And then sometimes I'll send them out, so what are you going to do to celebrate?
Right.
This is a big goal, so what are you going to do? You know, my client's just like hit her $1 million sales goal, and she's on her way to $1.5 million, which is her stretch goal. And I said, so if you hit the stretch goal, what are you going to do? This is a big one. You better plan something good. You know? So.
What do your clients tell you about what works for them? What do they say to you?
What do they say to me? Usually we sort of agree on something that they're going to do between sessions, and some of the time it's something new. It's often things I like make up on the spot that is pulling things from different places for them to try out as a model. And they'll come back and they'll say, oh, that worked really well. Or they'll say, I couldn't do it.
Right.
And so if they say they couldn't do it, then that's fine, and we just look at something different, or we look at maybe the fact that they couldn't do it because they had mental things going on about being scared to do it, or resistant to doing it, and we just look at that stuff. But I think between sessions, most people really like the daily dozen that I talked about earlier. They love it, and they don't do it all the time, which isn't really helpful anyway because you get bored with it, but they'll do it for like a couple weeks or so and then drop it for a while and then pick it up a while. The flipping technique they say they really like, and they get, like I mentioned, that they'll say, and I thought, okay, so what would, if I was talking with Deb, what would she say? She'd say, I need to flip it, and so they'd flip it in their mind. So, and pretty soon it just gets natural, so that they do it, so they really like that. I think some of the other things they really like is just learning how to reframe things in more positive and empowering ways. Yeah. Because that's something that I just do naturally all the time that I work with them, and that's something that it's just like the strong voices that we heard when we were growing up. We sort of internalize them, and when they continually internalize a perspective that frames it in a positive way for themselves, or in a growth-oriented way, then that's one more voice in their head that can help them do that. Mm-hmm.
And how can you tell them? How can you tell that they're progressing, they're moving forward?
Well, usually because some of the things that they wanted to do, or some ideas that they came in at the beginning, are being achieved. Sometimes, like the clients that I work with over a very long period of time, it's a continual cycle of, that it'll be moving ahead. It's sort of like, I call it the cosmic connect the dot game. Did you have connect the dots in Denmark, like coloring books where you
yeah.
So as you go through life in a path, like for a while, like you see a goal, like you want to go to the MAP program or something, and it's a great goal out in front of you, and then everything's lined up and you're on your way to the goal, and it feels really good as long as you're making progress, and then you get to the goal and you're very happy. But pretty soon you've just been sitting there, and now what do? So you get another goal. So it's that cosmic connect the dot game, and it's a question of working with them through all those different stages, through the exciting just finding the goal and moving towards it, and some of the challenges that come up on the way, and then they get there, and the celebration, and then the what's next exploration. So it just follows that kind of cycle.
Right. And what do you think causes the changes? What could be the mechanisms?
Well, one of the things that I've looked at is intentional change theory, and out of Case Western, and I think that has, as you look at what the components that they say cause change is having, it sort of fits with my model. It's a clear vision of what you want, something usually that's different than what is. Yeah. And then an alignment of all parts of your being, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and all the little voices in your head. And when they're all aligned around it, then there's a sort of a natural success that comes out of that by just being so aligned with it that then you're naturally, instinctively drawn to do things that help you get there.
Right. And other things that might cause the positive outcome?
Positive outcomes? I think most of it lies within the client.
So what could that be?
Their spirit? I don't know. You can see it in people. There's certain people that have this spark, and you just know that they are going to be successful. I tend to work with pretty successful people. Sometimes they're very successful in some areas and not so much in others. Yeah. And they would like to be more successful in those other areas, so we take the model. So they say, look, you're really successful here. what do you do that works for you? What are your success factors? And then we also look at what changes in success, like as people rise in the corporate world. Marshall Goldsmith, the coach Marshall Goldsmith, has a book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And that's, usually being a strong solo performer gets you so far, but if you try to do that, you can't rise up any higher because you have to learn how to get things done through other people. And if you can't make that switch and not want all the glory for yourself, then you're never going to be a successful leader.
No.
And so sometimes it's getting them to switch their internal models. Sometimes it's getting them to apply their internal models.
Right.
But it usually comes from, most of it comes from inside of them.
Right.
Only occasionally it's that outside course correction because, okay, what got you here won't get you there.
Yeah. Can you say more about what's inside them, like spark, and what else? Like, how can you tell?
How can I tell that they have achieved something, or that they are successful, or what?
Or that they will be successful.
That
and
they will be?
Yeah, like what
oh my
what
gosh,
else?
You're asking me to define how my intuition works. It's really difficult. It's really difficult. Let's see. I hear high energy in their voice when they talk about something. Some of the research that's come out about looking at high school yearbook pictures and how big a smile somebody has will determine a lot of their success later in life, or how long they live and things like that. There is a tone of smiling to voices that you can hear almost. I mean, actually you can tell when people are smiling. They've done a lot of research this in telemarketing, because they found that telemarketers who have a mirror in front of them and the word smile under it, and they smile when they're on the phone, they sell a whole lot more than telemarketers that don't. So you can hear, people hear something that comes with the smile over the phone. So it's hearing that smile. It's some of the things that we know from the VIA assessment, that's zest. People have zest, people who love and love to be loved, and maybe they love, people, but they also love ideas, or they love their goals, or they love the process of getting there. So there's that sense of love that also helps it grow, I think.
Other things?
Other things, oh my gosh. I guess if you get down even deeper than that, it might be just that human spirit. In some people, the human spirit has been quelched a lot when they were little. And those are people that are not likely to come to coaching anyway. But their inner spirit, their inner light is just not very bright. And there's other people who you just look at them and you see a bonfire. Those are the kind of younger coaches that I love to mentor, because you just look at them and you just know from how they interact with people, how they express themselves, how much they love life. You know that they're going to go places. And I don't know how I know, other than just saying it's that energy in their voice, it's their smile, it's their connection and engagement with you when they talk with you.
And how do you develop yourself as a professional?
Well, because I'm certified through the International Coach Federation, I'm required to take 40 hours of continuing professional education over a 3-year period. So I do that, but what I focus on in that is the things that just really excite me and light me up. I love what's going on in neuroscience now, especially the neuroscience of leadership, David Rock's work. I'm fascinated by it. I just listened to a webinar with him last night, and that always gives me lots of interesting ideas. I listen to a lot of the MAP speakers are part of a professional, the phone series that they have. I listen to that for my positive psychology ones. I work with a mastermind group that are all positive psychology MAP program graduates and coaches. And the 4 of us do a really interesting combination of coaching and teaching each other the cool things we find out in the world, and then helping each other achieve their goals as coaches. So it's a wonderful, wonderful group that's come out of MAP. It's one of my favorite outcomes of the program. And I meet with them every Sunday morning.
Oh, wow.
By phone, and we're actually going to meet in person tomorrow morning.
So,
Sunday morning.
Sunday,
So it's a combination of being with people and then taking classes, either teleclasses or in-person workshops. And I do it from a whole variety of different sources. I do positive psychology, I do things that are straight coaching, I do things related to neuroscience, I've done things related to somatic coaching or body coaching. I've even done things from out of shamanism. And looking at how we can bring shamanic principles into it. which is very interesting
Yeah.
to think about too. But works. You just have to translate the language. I found that so often it's like, and even a lot of the spiritual things that I'm very interested in, people don't like the spiritual wording, but if you just put it into principles of life, instead of saying God, you say life. You just learn the right wordings to use, and people are very hungry for that. They're very hungry for something that touches them at a core level.
Can you give me more examples of words that you change?
Words that I change? That's one of the things I love in the world is finding other people that I call translators, that are out there taking stuff from one realm, putting it in another realm, and how do you get that to work? So, I'll say life instead of God, or some people I'll say the universe, or some people I'll say spirit. I ask them, usually in the first session or so, I ask them if they believe in something beyond themselves and what they call it.
Yeah.
And if they're strict Christians, I will use Christian terminology. If they're Jewish, I'll use Jewish terminology. So, I haven't coached anybody who's Islamic yet, but basically it's you work with what's there for them because that's their language for it, but it all means the same thing.
Right.
So that's one thing that I do. Some of the stuff that is more along the lines of, it's been warped, so I almost hate to say it, but it's like the law of attraction or something that's out there. You wouldn't say the law of attraction in a business meeting, but you would say, look, the more that we focus on the problem, the more we're getting a problem. And as Einstein said, a problem is never solved at the level of thinking that it was created.
No.
So we need to get to a whole different level. And it may not even be a thinking level. It may be that we need to get down to what do we want to achieve and then just really connect with that. So I'll talk about it that way in a business context.
Right.
So a lot of the things that you think about where you want them to be by the end, and then you think about what kind of language will get them there.
Right.
Sometimes business people are into just pure positive psychology, but mostly they're not. Mostly they're into what positive psychology can do for them.
Yeah.
So just having people in a room looking at their strengths would not be appealing to them. But if you say people who spend some time each day focusing on their strengths are more productive and have much higher engagement in the organization, they want those things. So that's the language that works for them.
Right. And when you learn something new about stuff like this, how do you integrate it in your coaching?
Usually, if it's appropriate, when I learn things, I'm excited about them, so they're near the front of my mind. And then I'm going to be sharing a whole bunch of some of the stuff that I'm learning from both Arbinger and the listening to the body long distance with my clients over the next few weeks. But mostly what happens is if I see an opportunity where it seems to relate, I will bring it up as a possibility. And then the client has their choice to,
Right.
If they sound interested and they won't ask me another question about it, I'll go deeper. And if they say, oh, that's nice, but yesterday what happened to me, then we're on what happened yesterday.
Right, yeah. What would you say about positive psychology coaching? Is that a special way of coaching, or is it like other ways of coaching? Or
I don't typically call myself a positive psychologist coach, and I draw from many modalities. So I think people that would go through a MAP program and come out with a specific kind of way of just applying all the MAP things, that would be one thing. And that, I think the difference in that would be that they would attract a certain group of people that would want positive psychology and would be very open to that. But in my view, when I've trained coaches, and I've trained coaches for about 4 years, I think it's more important to not be so tied to your bag of tricks and much more open to what does the client need in the moment.
Yeah.
And so if all that you have in your toolkit is positive psychology, you can certainly coach people well and you will have a lot of interesting things to do with them, but you focus more on the person than on the tools.
Yeah.
And because that will be effective. But most people I know that have gone into positive psychology have other talents and skills and experiences, and it's really that the coach brings their whole being, their whole knowledge database with them, and that they can draw from many things.
Yeah. Are there things that we've not talked about, like leadership programs or?
I do a lot of work in leadership programs, and And I try to do the same kind of thing there. I brought Talvin Shahar in to teach positive leadership in some of our courses here. I do a lot of sort of strengths-oriented exercises. Worked with another faculty member who's now teaching the Strengths Finder as part of one of his success sessions with people, and he balances it out, like what success is, a balance of achievement versus satisfaction.
Yeah.
So, and then, where is your balance? Helping people find that, and we do that with our most senior execs here. Life balance is one of the big issues for them.
Yeah.
And how do they've achieved a lot in their careers, but how do they keep this balanced in a way that keeps their family intact? And
Right.
what happens when they are moved every 2 years around the globe, and what that does to their families. So we try to look at ways that we can help them, get more into who they are, and then use some positive ways to help them frame it. And some things, we use the Wheel of Life in that session, so that they can look and see where they would like to be in different areas. And so my role here is we're a business school, and it's very quantitative. And so when I got here, everything was very quantitative in that way. And I see my role here as one of the ways to sort of help bring in some of the other things that people are hungry for in the business world. And so I help design some short exercises that you intersperse with the other content, because they want the business content. They want to be, they want to learn strategy, and they want to learn marketing, and they want to learn finance, but they also really want to have that fit into who they are as a person, and that's what I like to help them do.
Right. Are there other things that we've not talked about that are important to understand the way that you work?
I think we've talked about most of it. It's just very flexible, very focused on who the person is.
Yeah.
And really it's just sort of a delightful exploration of who they are in combination with what I bring to it, and then how it relates to the world.
We're talking about the levels, like psychotherapy and coaching, and you could do fix-it coaching, or we didn't.
Oh, right, the 3 different levels.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about that on camera. Okay, yeah. So it really has to do with how deep you go with someone as a coach. The first level that most people start on as coaches when they first begin is looking at the person, and they see usually a problem. They see a problem.
Yeah.
And hopefully in positive psychology they'll also see the strengths and the opportunities. But they'll work sort of tactically at that level about fixing the problem.
Yeah.
And reaching the goal and doing that. And that's fine. That's the first level. The second level, if they want to go a little bit deeper in their work, is they'll start to look at what is it about the person that's making it easier or more difficult for them to do that, and they'll work sort of on the personal level rather than on the external, just do these steps. And that gets a little deeper into it and helps people understand more about themselves, so that they can carry that with them and achieve something else later on their own. And then what I find is that the deepest level, which is for me the most fun level to work on, is the being level, who they are as a person. Another way to describe that is, how do they define or describe themselves? So I had one client at one point that described himself as a survivor. Which is a really tough thing, because if that's how you define yourself, every experience that comes to you is going to look like something that you have to either battle against or triumph over, and it's going to create challenges in your relationship. There's a person with 2 PhDs and a master's degree and no friends.
Right.
And because he always saw everything that way. So we worked a lot on helping him redefine who he was.
Right.
So sometimes you can do it, sometimes you can't. Some people are willing to go that deep and redefine themselves, and some people are not.
And so how do you discuss it with people? Like, do you say that up front, or do you
it's never like, hi, let's redefine yourself. No, it definitely doesn't work that way. It usually works over time as I start to get a sense of are they, I'll put little feelers out there about things like that, and then just see if they open up to it. Or sometimes they'll just come to it themselves, and they'll come back and say, I realized that I was really looking at things this way. Oh, I know what I was going to talk about with you. It's like the difference between do you give people advice in coaching or not. And I don't really so much look at it as advice, but when I first went into coaching, there were 2 coach training schools available. Now there are millions of them. Yeah. But when I started back in the early 90s, there was Coach University, and there was Coaches Certification Institute, and they had split apart. They used to be one, and they split apart over the issue of, do you give advice to a client? And Coaches Training Institute said, never, never, never. They've since changed that slightly, but it was like, no, no, you only draw information out. And Coach University said, not so much that you don't direct them per se, or say, this is what you need to do, because that's consulting, but instead you can offer a perspective or a variety of options that people are, that they might not have seen, and allow them to choose from the menu. And that's sort of the way that I work. I believe that it's fine to offer people, different perspectives or a range of options to consider, but I'm always really closely checking and asking them to check in and say, how does this feel? I ask that question a lot. So what do you think about that? What's coming up in you as you think about this? Because you really need to make sure that you're not directing them, because that's not coaching.
No. Well, the way I see it is that's an empirical question. You can kind of test whether one way works better than the other. Yeah. So, at least for some people.
Right. So, and some people are more open to one way than the other.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to other people? Like
that were starting off, or that were
starting off, interested in positive psychology, interested in coaching, like to learn more about this. What advice could you give to them?
I think the most important piece of advice I could give to them is care more about the person, and focus more on the person than you do on what you're going to teach them. You can never sell coaching. It doesn't work. People say, how can I get more clients? Well, you don't go out there and sell coaching. What you do is you, in a way, believe in and get excited yourself about the next step down the road for these people, who they could become. And if you do that, and if you talk with them, and then you have ideas or resources or things that you bring into the conversation, that's what gets people interested in partnering with you, because they can suddenly see that vision of themselves further down the road.
Yeah. Other advice?
Other advice? I think it's really important to be clear about the difference between coaching and therapy, especially for therapists that go into coaching, because there are legal issues involved with that. I think it's also really important to know the difference between consulting and mentoring and coaching. And you can cross the line as long as you know what the line is and you tell people what you're doing in those cases. Because there are a lot of people that are consultants that just, coaching is a hot term now, so they'll call themselves a coach, but they're just doing consulting.
Right.
And I think for the, just for the well-being of the industry, we need to be really clear about what coaching is and what it's not.
And how would you describe the lines, like the different ones?
Okay. Mentoring has to do with something, and I will do this with the coaches that I work with that are positive psychology coaches. I will mentor as well as coach, because I've been down the path that they're starting down. I have started my own coaching business. I do incorporate positive psychology as well as other things into my plan. I do know the value of knowing what the rules are and being flexible and knowing when you can break them with a client. So that mentoring is taking your own knowledge of something that you know really well and imparting that to someone. And you can combine that with coaching, which is helping them get clearer about what their talents, strengths, and opportunities are and how they can leverage them. And consulting is much more issue-oriented. It's more the first level of coaching I talked about, where you're brought in, here's a particular problem, how are you going to solve this? But the joy of coaching for me is not looking at problems and how can we solve them. It's looking at opportunities and strengths and how can we help these shine.
Yeah.
So.
And psychotherapy and coaching? Psychotherapy
and coaching is extremely different from a legal standpoint, because positive psychology or positive psychology is not privileged under law. If you're coaching, in the U.S. anyway, and you get subpoenaed by a court and they say, tell me everything your client told you, you have to do that. Whereas if you're a psychotherapist, you do not. You are privileged under law to not have to divulge that. And in some cases, that matters a lot to the client.
Right.
Okay, they may feel safer with certain issues with a therapist because they know it's totally legally protected.
Right.
Okay. Now, if you have somebody that needs to be legally protected, there's a question of your own ethics if you want to coach them or not, but that's a different thing. But so that's one of the main reasons. Also, coaches in general, if you just get general coach training, you're not trained in going into somebody's past and digging up family of origin issues or any of that. That takes a lot of in-depth training, and most coaches do not have it.
No.
So they shouldn't go there. They should know where the line is. They should know the line between that's a therapy issue and this is a coaching issue, and I think that's really important for people to be trained in their coaching programs. And most good coaching programs do talk about that regularly.
Right.
And there's one company called Mentor Coach that trains psychotherapists to become coaches. They take other people now too, but they started mostly with therapists, and they do a really clear job of delineating that for people. Because the things that coaches do, therapists can do, and many of them do, but coaches can't do everything that a therapist does.
Right.
And so therapy is much more about taking people from dysfunctional to functional. It's a sort of a healing modality, and it deals a lot more with the past issues, whereas coaching is much more of a growth modality than a healing modality. It's focused more on the present and the future. And what's the third thing? It's usually focused on strengths rather than a problem that you need to fix.
Yeah.